There is something you have trusted your entire life without ever deciding to trust it. Not a person, not an institution, something older than both. Something that exists in the space between the marks on a page and the meaning those marks carry. You have trusted it the way you trust that the floor will be there when you step out of bed in the morning. Not because you checked, not because someone proved it to you, but because it has never once failed to be there. That thing is mathematics. And for most of human history, this trust was considered not just reasonable, but philosophically justified. Mathematics was the one domain where certainty was not a feeling, it was a structure. You could follow the steps. You could check the work. You could, in principle, trace every true statement back to its foundations and watch the whole edifice hold together under scrutiny. This was not religion. This was not intuition. This was proof. The hardest kind of knowing that human beings had ever invented. Stand still for a moment. Feel the ground beneath you. You are approximately 170 centimeters tall, or perhaps a little more, a little less. You occupy a specific location in space. Your heart is beating at a rate somewhere between 60 and 100 times per minute. These are facts. They are measurable. They are either true or false. And if someone asked you to prove them, you could, not through argument, not through persuasion, but through the act of measurement, through the submission of the question to the discipline of counting. This is what mathematics promised, that every well-formed question about number, about quantity, about structure, could in principle receive one of two answers, true or false. And that whichever answer it received could in principle be demonstrated, not believed, demonstrated. The promise had a name. It was called completeness. The idea that a sufficiently powerful mathematical system would be capable of proving every statement that happened to be true within it. That nothing true would fall through the cracks. That the universe of mathematical fact and the universe of mathematical proof would, eventually, be the same universe. This was not a wild hope. This was a program. Mathematicians at the turn of the 20th century worked on it the way engineers work on a bridge, methodically, collaboratively, with the confidence that the final structure would stand. The goal was a single unified foundation from which all of mathematics could be derived. Every theorem, every number, every relationship between quantities, all of it grounded in a small set of axioms so clear and so obvious that no reasonable person could doubt them. It felt close. It felt, in fact, nearly complete. You are still standing on that floor, still breathing at roughly 15 breaths per minute. Chicho, your body is an extraordinarily complex system, but it follows rules. Your cells divide according to instructions encoded in molecules. Your neurons fire according to electrochemical gradients. Nothing in your body decides to stop following the laws of physics on a given Tuesday morning. The rules hold. They have always held. And somewhere deep in the intuition you carry through your day, you extend this same confidence to mathematics. The rules there hold too. They have always held. Now consider a sentence, not a mathematical sentence yet, just a sentence that says, about itself, this sentence is false. You have probably encountered this before. It is called the liar's paradox, and it is very old. If the sentence is true, then what it says is true, which means it is false. If it is false, then what it says is false, which means it is true. The sentence breaks something. It creates a loop that has no exit. And for most of history, this was treated as a curiosity, a trick of language, a malfunction in the informal machinery of words, something that would never infect the clean and formal world of mathematics, where every term was defined with precision and every step was governed by explicit rules. Language is slippery. Mathematics is not. The paradox lived in language. Mathematics was safe. This is where the story pauses. There was a man in Vienna who became interested in what it would mean to take the liar's paradox seriously, not as a linguistic curiosity, but as something that might carry structural weight. He was not interested in destroying mathematics. He was interested in understanding it. He worked quietly, carefully, and when he arrived at his result, he was 25 years old. He published it in 1931, and what he had found was not a trick. It was not a philosophical opinion. It was a proof. This is the point at which the intuitive story about mathematics, the one you have carried your whole life, begins to develop its first fracture. To understand what he proved, you have to first understand what a formal system is. Take your body again as a reference. When your immune system encounters a pathogen, it does not stop to ask what the pathogen means. It reads structure. It follows protocols encoded over millions of years of selection. It has rules, and it applies those rules to inputs, and it produces outputs. There is no interpretation happening. There is only procedure. A formal mathematical system works the same way. You begin with a set of symbols. You specify which arrangements of those symbols are permitted. These are your axioms. You specify the rules by which you can manipulate those arrangements to produce new ones. These are your rules of inference. And then you ask, what can you produce from here? What statements can you derive by following the rules? A statement is a theorem if it can be derived. A statement is not a theorem if no sequence of rule-following steps produces it. This is the entirety of the game. Now, consider a system powerful enough to talk about arithmetic. Not all of mathematics, just arithmetic. Addition, multiplication, the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on, forever. This is a very modest domain. Your body contains roughly 37 trillion cells, a number that lives comfortably inside this domain. The distance from your retina to the back of your skull, measured in nanometers, lives comfortably inside this domain. Arithmetic is not exotic. It is the mathematics of counting. Within such a system, something remarkable becomes possible. It becomes possible to encode statements about the system itself. To write, in the language of arithmetic, a statement that is not about numbers in the ordinary sense, but about what the system can and cannot prove. You can assign numbers to symbols. You can assign numbers to sequences of symbols. You can assign numbers to proofs. And then you can write arithmetic statements that, when decoded, say something about arithmetic. This is the machinery, and the man in Vienna used it to build a specific sentence. A sentence that said, in the language of arithmetic, the following: this statement is not provable in this system. He did not import this from language. He constructed it from within mathematics itself, using only the tools that mathematics provides. And then he asked, what happens if you try to evaluate it? If the statement is provable, then what it says is false, which means the system has just proved a false thing. That would mean the system is inconsistent, that it contains contradictions, that from its axioms you can derive both a statement and its opposite, which would mean you can derive anything, which would mean the system is useless. But if the statement is not provable, then what it says is true. There is something true in exactly the same sense that the number of your heartbeats today will be a specific true number, that the system cannot prove. This is not a paradox. It does not loop. It resolves cleanly in the most devastating possible direction. This is the incompleteness theorem. It belongs to Kurt Gödel, and it does not describe a defect in one particular system that could be patched. So it describes a structural feature of formal systems in general. You cannot build your way out of it. You cannot add axioms until it goes away. Adding axioms only creates a more powerful system with its own unprovable truths. Completeness and consistency, for any system capable of arithmetic, cannot coexist. You must choose one, and the one you choose is consistency. Because an inconsistent mathematics is no mathematics at all. You are breathing. Your blood is oxygenating. Somewhere in your brain, a pattern of activation is processing these words, and that pattern follows rules. And those rules have never, in your entire life, stopped following the laws that govern them. But here is the fracture that this finding opens beneath you. The floor is still there. Your body is still following its rules. 2 plus 2 is still 4, and no theorem can change that. The incompleteness theorem does not say that mathematics is wrong. It does not say that proofs are unreliable. It does not dissolve arithmetic into ambiguity. Everything you have ever calculated is still calculated correctly. What it says is that the universe of mathematical truth is larger than the universe of mathematical proof. That there is a region, not a small region, not an exotic corner, but a fundamental stratum of things that are true in exactly the way that your height is true. Your age is true. The number of cells in your body is true. That cannot be reached by any formal procedure, no matter how sophisticated. This is not a gap in human knowledge that will close as we learn more. It is not a technological limitation. It is not a resource problem. It is a structural feature of formalization itself. The moment you choose to ground mathematics in explicit rules, the moment you build the kind of rigorous foundation that would make mathematics unassailable, you guarantee that the resulting structure will contain truths it cannot touch. The man who found this did not find it comforting. He spent much of the rest of his life working on the philosophy of mathematical objects, on what it would mean for something to be mathematically true in the absence of proof. He moved toward a position that most of his contemporaries found difficult to accept, that mathematical objects exist in some non-physical sense, that true statements are true because they correspond to something, even when no procedure can verify that correspondence. He was not dogmatic about this. He was troubled by it. He kept working. Near the end of his life, he was afraid of being poisoned. He would not eat food unless his wife had prepared it. When she was hospitalized for 6 months, he stopped eating almost entirely. He weighed 65 pounds when he died. This is a fact that sits awkwardly next to the cold precision of his theorem, and it is worth sitting with that awkwardness rather than resolving it too quickly. The man who proved the limits of provability lived inside those limits like anyone else. He was not outside the problem he had found. Feel your weight on the floor again. You trust this. The floor is solid. And now here is the thing that cannot be unseen. When you sit inside a formal system, any formal system, you cannot, from within it, determine whether the system is consistent. This is the second incompleteness theorem, which followed from the first. A system cannot prove its own consistency without already assuming that consistency, which is no proof at all. To know that arithmetic does not contain a contradiction, you would need a vantage point outside arithmetic. And every vantage point you reach outside arithmetic is itself a formal system with the same problem. You are standing on a floor. Beneath the floor is another floor. Beneath that floor is another floor. You cannot reach the bottom, not because the floors are infinite, but because the concept of a bottom, a foundation that justifies itself, is incoherent in exactly the way that the liar's paradox is incoherent, and for precisely the same structural reasons. Mathematics did not break when this was discovered. Mathematicians went on doing mathematics. They still do. The incompleteness theorem is not used as an excuse to stop proving things. The vast majority of mathematical practice is unaffected by it in any practical sense. You can spend your entire career in mathematics without ever encountering one of the unprovable truths. The same way you can spend your entire life on land without encountering the deepest ocean trenches, even knowing they exist. But knowing they exist changes something. Science, more broadly, has an honest relationship with this kind of change. The practice of science does not claim to reach final truths. It claims to build models that predict and explain, that survive contact with evidence, that can be improved and sometimes overturned. The incompleteness theorem is not a crisis for science in the practical sense. Science uses mathematics as a tool, and the tool works. But at the foundational level, at the level where you ask not what works, but what is true, and why, and whether truth and provability are the same thing. The incompleteness theorem marks a permanent frontier. There are things we cannot know by following rules. Not because we lack the rules, not because we haven't tried hard enough, but because the structure of rule following itself, when it becomes powerful enough to talk about itself, generates questions it cannot answer. The more rigorous your system, the more precisely you can see the edge of what rigorous systems can reach. This is not comfortable. It is not supposed to be. The intuition you carry, the one that says mathematics is the place where everything is either provable or disprovable, where certainty is available, where the floor is solid all the way down. That intuition is not stupid. It is not naive. It is the most reasonable intuition in the world. Built from a lifetime of watching mathematics work with extraordinary reliability. Built from the fact that every calculation you have ever performed that was correct because the rules held and produced a verifiable result. The intuition is a natural response to a genuine pattern. It is just not the whole pattern. The whole pattern includes a horizon, a place where the rules end, not because of ignorance, not because of complexity, but because the rules, applied fully and rigorously, eventually point to their own incompleteness. The more seriously you take mathematics, the more clearly you can see this horizon. It is not a failure of mathematics. It is what mathematics looks like when you look at it closely enough. Your heartbeat is measurable. The number of your heartbeats since you were born is a specific number, a true number, even though no one has counted it. Whether that specific number has a particular mathematical property, whether it is, say, a prime, or whether it satisfies some equation, is either true or false. And somewhere in the landscape of mathematical truth, there are statements exactly like this. True, specific, unambiguous in their truth, and permanently beyond the reach of proof. You will not encounter them today. You will not notice them missing from your calculations. Your bank account will still balance. Your navigation will still work. The floor will still be there when you step out of bed. But you are no longer standing on a foundation that goes all the way down. You are standing on a structure that is reliable, that is useful, that is the most powerful tool for understanding the world that human beings have ever developed, and that rests at its deepest level on a soil it cannot analyze. This is not terrifying in the way that a sudden noise is terrifying. It is terrifying in the slower, much quieter way that certain truths are terrifying. The way you might feel looking at the night sky for a long time, a shift in the scale of things that does not resolve back into comfort when you look away. The sky looks the same. The numbers still add up. The floor is solid. And you know, now, that solidity and depth are not the same thing.